My sister was sobbing outside my apartment door at 1:47 inches the morning. I could hear her through the wall, not just crying, but the kind of crying that comes from panic, not grief. Fists hitting the door. My name, over and over. My mother's voice somewhere behind her, shakier, higher. Please, please open up. We can explain everything. I was sitting on my couch with a cup of tea that had gone cold. I had been sitting there for 3 hours. I wasn't crying. I wasn't shaking. I was just still. The kind of still you get when something inside you finally stops fighting. I didn't open the door. Let me tell you how we got here. My name is Maya. I'm 32 years old. I'm a licensed CPA working for a mid-size accounting firm in Atlanta. I have a studio apartment that I keep very clean, a rescue cat named Pepper, and a savings account that I built entirely by myself from the age of 22. I mention these things not to brag, but because for most of my life, my family acted like none of it existed. I am the middle child. My older sister, Diane, is 36. My younger brother, Caleb, is 28. According to my family's internal mythology, Diane is the beautiful one. She married well, hosts holidays, has 2 kids who wear matching outfits in Christmas photos. Caleb is the funny one, the charming one, the one my mother calls her surprise blessing. He works in sales and calls home every Sunday. I was never given a title. If pressed, I think my family would have said I was the responsible one, the way you'd describe a kitchen appliance. Reliable, useful. Not something you celebrate, just something you'd notice if it stopped working. I started noticing the pattern when I was around 14. Diane's dance recitals got framed photos. My honor roll certificates got A, that's nice. Maya, and ended up in a kitchen drawer. Caleb's Little League games were family events. My academic competitions were scheduling conflicts. I told myself it was just how families worked, that attention wasn't a resource distributed equally. I told myself a lot of things for a very long time. At 22, I graduated college with a degree in accounting and a job offer already in hand. My parents came to the graduation. Afterward, at dinner, my mother spent 40 minutes talking about how Diane was thinking about redecorating her living room. I remember counting the minutes on the clock behind my mother's head. I was not mentioned once. I moved to Atlanta. I built my life. I was good at it. But here's the thing about being the responsible one in a family that takes responsibility for granted. Eventually, responsibility finds you. It started small. My mother called 3 months after I moved, asking if I could help cover a car repair. $300. Of course I could. I was working. I sent it without thinking twice. Then it was a medical bill my father needed help with. Then it was Caleb's rent when he got between jobs just for 2 months, my mother said. Caleb never mentioned it himself, never said thank you. 4 months later, my mother asked again. I said yes again. And then, 4 years ago, my father called and told me the house was in trouble. He didn't say it that way, exactly. He never said anything directly. He said they were dealing with some cash flow issues and that the mortgage had gotten a little behind. He used the word temporary 5 times in 10 minutes. At the end he said, "I know you're good with numbers, Maya. You always were." That was it. That was his ask. I looked at their mortgage. It was not a little behind. They had missed 4 payments. The house, the one I grew up in, the one my grandmother had lived in before them, the one my mother talked about like it was sacred ground, was 60 days from foreclosure proceedings. I want to be honest about what I felt in that moment. I felt afraid for them. I felt the old pull, the gravitational force of being needed by people who never quite saw me. And underneath all of it, I felt something I couldn't name yet, something that would take me another 4 years to understand. I transferred enough to bring the mortgage current. I set up a payment plan with myself and their lender. Over the next 4 years, I quietly covered the gaps. Not every payment, but the shortfalls. The months my father's irregular consulting work didn't come through. The quarter my mother's part-time bookkeeping dried up. $12,000 over 4 years, give or take, woven so quietly into the background of their lives that I am not sure they ever fully understood where the stability was coming from. I didn't tell anyone. Not Diane, not Caleb, not my closest friends. I didn't do it for recognition. I want to be clear about that. I did it because I loved them, imperfectly and confusingly, the way you love people who have never quite loved you back correctly. But I also want to be honest about the cost. Every time I sent money, I told myself it would change something, that they would see me differently, that my mother would one day call just to talk, not just to ask, that my father would introduce me at family gatherings without that half-second pause where he seemed to be remembering I existed. None of that happened. What happened instead was my cousin Rachel's engagement party, 7 months ago. Rachel is on my mother's side. We're not close, but the family made it an event. Big backyard party, catered, string lights, the whole thing. I drove up from Atlanta on a Friday evening. I brought a nice gift. I wore a dress I had bought specifically for the occasion. I arrived to find the family already clustered in groups, drinks in hand, mid-conversation. My mother saw me come through the gate, and her face did something complicated, not happy, not unhappy, just recalculating. She said, "Oh, you made it the way you'd say it about a package you'd half expected to get lost in transit." Diane was there with her husband and kids. She hugged me briefly and immediately turned back to the conversation I'd interrupted. Caleb was there, louder than everyone, holding court near the drinks table. He pointed at me and said, "Hey, the accountant's here," and people laughed, and the moment passed. I found a seat. I talked to Rachel, who was genuinely lovely. I ate the food. I tried. About 2 hours in, Rachel's mother, my Aunt Carol, gathered everyone for a group photo. She had a specific vision. Immediate family first, then extended. She positioned people with the focus of someone directing a film. My mother, my father, Diane, Diane's husband, their kids, Caleb, all arranged. I stepped into the frame. My mother put her hand on my arm gently, which somehow made it worse, and said, "Carol wants just the core family first. Sweetheart, you can be in the next one." I stepped back. There was no next one. Carol moved on to other groupings. I watched my family arrange and rearrange themselves in photographs for 40 minutes. I was in none of them. At one point I was standing 3 feet from my mother and the photographer simply framed me out. I drove back to Atlanta that night instead of staying over like I'd planned. 3.5 hours, mostly in silence. Pepper was waiting by the door when I got home. I sat on the floor with her for a long time. That was when the thing I hadn't been able to name began to take shape. I want to talk about what happened next, because I think it matters, because one of the things I've heard people say about stories like mine is, how did you just suddenly change? And the answer is, I didn't. It wasn't sudden. It was 7 months of very quiet, very deliberate thinking. I started keeping a record. Not out of anger, out of clarity. I wrote down every financial transfer I had made to my family over the past 4 years. Dates, amounts, what it was for. I pulled my bank statements and cross-referenced them. The number, fully added up, was larger than I had let myself consciously know. Keeping it vague had been its own kind of self-protection. I started therapy. My therapist is a woman named Dr. Okafor, and in our 3rd session, she asked me a question I've thought about almost every day since. She said, "When you imagine stopping, just stopping all of it, what's the first feeling that comes up?" I said relief before I had time to censor myself, and then I started crying in a way I hadn't in years. I also, practically speaking, did some research. Because here's something I had never fully processed. I was a co-signer on one of my parents' refinancing documents from 3 years ago. It had felt like a formality at the time, something my father had asked me to sign without much explanation. I looked it up. I understood what it meant now. I was not just sending money. I was legally attached to their financial situation in ways I had not fully thought through. I spent 2 months talking to a financial advisor and reviewing my options. I made a plan. A slow, careful, undramatic plan. I was not trying to hurt anyone. I was trying to stop disappearing. And then my mother called, 9 weeks ago, to tell me about the birthday party. She was calling, she said, to let me know that they were throwing Diane a surprise 40th birthday party, a big one, at a rented venue, with a DJ and a photo booth and a guest list of 60 people. She was very excited. She talked for 11 minutes about the planning. At the end she said, We weren't sure if you'd be able to make it, with your work schedule and everything, so we just wanted to let you know. I asked when it was. She told me the date a Saturday. A Saturday I had no plans. Will there be room? I asked. She paused. It's a tight list, honey. You know how these things are. I said I understood. I told her it sounded like a wonderful party. I said I hoped Diane would love it. I hung up and sat very still for a few minutes. Then, I called my financial advisor. The actual party was 6 weeks ago. I know how it went because Caleb posted extensively on social media. There were photos of my mother and father beaming, photos of the whole family at the photo booth, a video of Diane blowing out candles on a 4-tiered cake. In the caption of one photo, my mother wrote, "So grateful for this beautiful family. Every one of you. Every one of them." I counted the tagged people. I was not among them. I looked at that caption for a long time. And I thought about the house that caption's author lived in. The mortgage I had helped keep current for 4 years. The car repair. The medical bills. Caleb's rent. All of it invisible, unremarked upon, taken as simply the background condition of their lives. I made my decision. I want to be precise about what I did, because I am not proud of every piece of it, and I am not interested in making myself into someone I wasn't. I didn't do anything illegal. I didn't do anything cruel. But I did do something deliberate, and it changed things permanently, and I knew it would. First, I wrote a letter. Not to send, just to write. 7 pages. Everything I had never said. The photo at the graduation dinner. The engagement party. The birthday I wasn't invited to. The $12,000. The cosign I hadn't understood. All of it. When I was done, I filed it away. Then I called my father. I told him that I had been thinking about my financial situation and that I needed to make some changes. I told him that the informal support I had been providing was going to end, that the transfers would stop. I said it clearly and without drama. I told him I loved him and I wished them well. My father was quiet for a moment. Then he said, in a voice I'd never quite heard from him, "Maya, we've been counting on that." I said I understood. I told him I was sorry that hadn't been communicated more clearly between us. I told him I thought he and my mother were capable of managing and that I believed in them. He said, "Do you know how much trouble we'll be in?" I said, "I do, actually. I know the exact numbers." I also, and this part is harder to explain, notified the bank that I wanted to begin the process of being released from my cosigner status on the refinancing document. This is not a simple or immediate process. It requires either a refinance or a specific lender agreement. I was not doing it to blow anything up. I was doing it because my name should not be attached to a financial obligation that comes with no acknowledgement, no voice, no seat at the table. The bank, as required, sent documentation to my parents. That is what started everything. I didn't expect to hear from my family right away. I had prepared myself for the silence first, and then eventually the calls. I thought I had a few days. I had 48 hours. My mother called, and I let it go to voicemail. She called again. Then Diane called, which surprised me. She almost never calls. Then my father called 3 times in one evening. I listened to the voicemails later, one after another, sitting at my kitchen table. They were not angry, exactly. That surprised me. They were scared. My mother's voice had a quality I had only heard once before, when my grandmother was sick. My father sounded confused in a way that seemed genuine, like he was only now assembling a picture he should have seen long ago. Diane's voicemail said, "Maya, I don't know what's going on, but Mom is really upset. Can you just call someone back? Whatever this is, we can figure it out as a family." As a family. I wrote that phrase down in my notebook. I looked at it for a while. On the second night, at 1:47 inches the morning, they came to my apartment. Not just my mother. My sister too, which I hadn't expected. My father had stayed home. I found out later he hadn't wanted to come, not because he didn't care, but because some part of him understood that what was happening was past the point of a conversation in a hallway. I sat on my couch, and I listened. My sister's voice, starting out demanding and getting quieter as the minutes passed. My mother's voice, which had given up on composure entirely. My name knocked against my door like something fragile being tested. I thought about the photo at the graduation dinner. I thought about being edged out of a frame at a family party while standing 3 feet away. I thought about every one of you. I thought about Dr. Okafor asking me what feeling came first when I imagined stopping, and the word that had come out of me before I could stop it. I did not open the door. I'm not going to tell you that felt good. I want to be careful about that. There is a version of this story where I felt triumphant, vindicated, electric with justice, and that version would be dishonest. What I felt was sad. Deeply, specifically sad, not for myself, or not only for myself, but for all the years that had led to a 1:47 a.m. moment that didn't have to happen. They left around 3 a.m. My mother called the next morning. I answered this time. She started with, "I need you to understand how serious this is." I let her finish. She explained the financial situation as though I wasn't the person who had been quietly managing it for 4 years. She said that Diane was worried, and Caleb was upset. She said, "We're your family, Maya." I said, "I know." She said, "Then why are you doing this?" I had thought about how I would answer this question. I had practiced several versions. I said, "Because I've been trying to be part of this family for a very long time, and I've been coming up short no matter what I did. And I think somewhere I started believing that if I could just be useful enough, something would change, and I don't believe that anymore." Silence. Then she said, "That's not fair. We love you." I said, "I believe you. I also believe you've never thought about whether I knew that." She said my name in a way that meant she was going to say something else, and I said gently, "Mom, I have to go to work." I hung up. I picked up Pepper. I stood at my apartment window for a minute, looking at the street. Then I got ready, and I went to work. In the weeks since, some things have happened and some things have not. My parents are in the process of refinancing. It's difficult but manageable. Caleb called me once and we had a short conversation that was mostly him asking if I was going through something, which was so exactly like him that I almost laughed. Diane texted me a long message that I have read many times. It did not apologize for anything specific, but it acknowledged, for the first time, that I had always been the one holding things together, and that she was sorry she hadn't said so sooner. I am still deciding what I think about that. I have not been to a family event since the engagement party. I have not sent any money. I sleep well. That is not a small thing. I used to wake up at 3 or 4 a.m. regularly, running numbers, calculating gaps, thinking about what I'd do if there was another call. I don't do that anymore. My body has gotten very quiet, in a way I didn't know it had been waiting to. I still talk to Dr. Okafor every 2 weeks. I am still working on the part of me that learned to earn her place in every room. That part doesn't unlearn quickly. But I am learning to notice when it's running, and to pause before I let it make decisions on my behalf. There's something I've been sitting with, that I want to say carefully, because I think it's the most true thing I can offer. I didn't leave my family because I stopped loving them. I left, and I use that word loosely, because I don't know yet what our relationship will look like. I stepped back because loving them, the way I had been loving them, was making me invisible to myself. Every dollar I sent, every gap I covered, every moment I stood 3 feet outside a photograph and told myself it was fine. All of it was me trying to purchase a belonging that was never actually on offer. You cannot buy your way into a family that has already decided where you stand. And the moment I understood that, really understood it, in my body and not just my brain, the question stopped being, how do I finally get them to see me, and became, what do I want my life to look like? I am still answering that question. I think that's okay. I think it's actually the right question to be sitting with. Right now, Pepper is asleep on the arm of my couch. My tea is hot, it's a Sunday, and I have nowhere I have to be. That is, I am realizing, more than enough. If you're watching this and something in it sounds familiar, if you've been the one quietly covering gaps, the one framed out of photos, the one who gets "that's nice," while someone else gets the celebration, I'm not here to tell you what to do. Every family is its own specific kind of complicated, and I don't think any of us should make permanent decisions out of a single bad night. But I'll ask you what Dr. Okafor asked me, because it changed something for me. When you imagine stopping, just stopping, all of it, what's the first feeling that comes up? Take a breath before you answer. Take as long as you need. And wherever you're watching from, whatever time it is for you right now, I hope you're somewhere you feel like you belong.